Why does one celebrity spend years chasing a Rolex Daytona while another becomes obsessed with a Cartier Crash that looks completely broken? Why would two people with unlimited money choose watches that couldn't be more different? The answer has nothing to do with watches, it has everything to do with human psychology. So today, we're exploring the psychology of celebrity watch choices and discovering what your Grail watch might secretly say about you. So let's start. If there is one watch that perfectly represents the psychology of winning, it's the Rolex Daytona. What's fascinating is that the Daytona wasn't originally created to become a luxury status symbol. It was designed for racing drivers. It was built for speed, precision, and performance under pressure. Look at celebrities like Mark Wahlberg, LeBron James, and countless professional athletes who own Daytonas. These are individuals whose lives have been built around competition. They measure progress, they chase goals. And psychologically, that's exactly what the Daytona represents. Unlike many luxury watches that rely on artistic design or mechanical complexity, the Daytona feels direct, purposeful, efficient. Every detail serves a function. That's why Daytona owners often share similar personality traits. They tend to be ambitious, goal-oriented, and highly driven. For them, the life often feels like a scoreboard, another goal, another mountain to climb, and perhaps that's why the Daytona remains one of the most desired watches on earth. Because when someone wears a Daytona, they're not just wearing a luxury watch, they're wearing a symbol of achievement itself. But not everyone is motivated by winning the next race. Some people are thinking much further ahead. That's where the Patek Philippe Nautilus enters the conversation. If the Daytona represents competition, the Nautilus represents legacy. A few brands in history have understood human psychology better than Patek Philippe. For years, their famous slogan reminded buyers that they never truly own a Patek Philippe, but merely look after it for the next generation. That message transformed the watch from a luxury product into something much more powerful. Suddenly, ownership wasn't about spending money, it was about responsibility and permanence. And that idea attracts a very specific personality type. When you look at collectors like Jay-Z or Ed Sheeran, you begin to understand the appeal. These individuals have already achieved extraordinary success. They don't need a watch to prove they're wealthy. They're chasing significance. They want to create something meaningful, preserve something valuable, and pass something important to the next generation. In many ways, the Nautilus is less about wealth, and that distinction explains why it's become one of the most influential watches ever created. But history shows that not everyone wants to preserve tradition. Some people want to challenge it, and that's exactly how one watch changed luxury watchmaking forever. Long before it became one of the most coveted watches on earth, the Royal Oak was considered a crazy idea, and that's exactly why it succeeded. When the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak debuted in 1972, many collectors thought it was completely insane, a luxury sports watch made from steel that cost more than many gold watches. At the time, the idea seemed ridiculous, yet decades later, the Royal Oak has become one of the most important designs in watchmaking history, and psychologically, that tells us something very interesting. People attracted to the Royal Oak often value individuality over conformity. They appreciate tradition, but they refuse to be limited by it. That's why the watch has become so popular among entrepreneurs, musicians, athletes, and innovators. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak is a hallmark of success in Hollywood and the sports world, famously worn by Kevin Hart and Serena Williams. It serves as a major milestone watch for modern stars. The Royal Oak represents the personality type that sees opportunity where others see risk. And honestly, that's what makes the Royal Oak so fascinating. Even after 50 years, it still feels like a watch for people who refuse to fit neatly into a box. And if the Royal Oak bends the rules, the next watch completely ignores them. The first time most people see a Cartier Crash, they think something has gone terribly wrong. That's exactly the point. Few watches in history have confused people more than the Cartier Crash. The first time most people see one, they assume something is wrong. The case looks melted, the dial appears distorted, the entire watch feels almost accidental. Yet that unusual appearance is precisely what transformed the Crash into one of the most collectible watches on earth. And psychologically, it attracts an entirely different personality type than anything we've discussed so far. The Crash appeals to people who value originality above almost everything else. These are individuals who rather be interesting than conventional. They'd rather start conversations than blend into the crowd. That's why artists, designers, actors, and creative thinkers are often drawn toward watches like this. Celebrities such as Rami Malek, Tyler the Creator, and Timothée Chalamet have been spotted wearing this on their wrists. They've embraced the Crash because it communicates something that wealth alone never can. It communicates individuality. Nobody buys this watch because it's practical. Nobody buys it because it represents logical decision making. And in a world filled with predictable luxury, that kind of originality becomes incredibly powerful. Now, while some people chase creativity, others become obsessed with performance. That's where Richard Mille comes in, which is often associated with its design and performance addiction. Few brands divide opinion like Richard Mille. Some people see the futuristic designs and eye-watering prices and assume they're simply status symbols. But beneath the bold aesthetics lies a philosophy that explains why so many elite performers are attracted to the brand. Richard Mille watches are built around performance, lightweight materials, advanced engineering, extreme durability, constant innovation. The brand became famous through partnerships with athletes like Rafael Nadal and Formula One drivers who actually compete while wearing watches worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And psychologically, that's incredibly revealing. Richard Mille owners are often obsessed with optimization. They're the type of people who constantly search for ways to improve. Faster, stronger, more efficient. They're focused entirely on the future. That's why Richard Mille feels less like traditional watchmaking and more like wearable technology from another dimension. And for high-performance personalities, that's deeply appealing. These individuals don't see life as something to be maintained. They see it as something to be upgraded. This explains why Richard Mille has become the unofficial uniform of elite performers who refuse to stop pushing boundaries. And honestly, this is what makes watch collecting so fascinating. So before we continue, let us know in the comments, what is your Grail watch? Whether you realize it or not, your answer may reveal more about your personality than you think. Now, so far we've explored competitors, rebels, creatives, and performance addicts. But the next personality type is completely different. Psychologically speaking, the Reverso attracts a very different type of person, the kind who values knowledge over recognition and substance over attention. The Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso occupies a fascinating place in watch culture because it attracts a type of collector that rarely seeks attention. Unlike a Rolex or a Richard Mille, the Reverso doesn't immediately announce itself from across the room. But what makes the Reverso psychologically interesting is the type of person it attracts. Reverso owners often value knowledge over visibility. They enjoy understanding how things work. They appreciate history, craftsmanship, and subtle design choices that most people overlook. Pierce Brosnan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jamie Foxx have been spotted wearing this masterpiece. This is the kind of watch someone buys after falling in love with the story behind it rather than the status attached to it. In many ways, the Reverso functions like a beautifully written novel. The more time you spend with it, the more layers you discover. Its Art Deco design, rich heritage, and mechanical ingenuity reward curiosity. And that curiosity is often a defining trait among intellectual personalities. And perhaps that's why the Reverso has survived for nearly a century without ever chasing trends. It doesn't need to. The people who love it were never interested in trends to begin with. And if some people seek knowledge, others seek authority. Throughout history, one watch quietly became the unofficial uniform of presidents, CEOs, and power brokers. And that tells us something about the people who choose it. If the Daytona represents achievement, the Rolex Day-Date represents arrival. This is the watch that tells the world the race is already over. Over the decades, presidents, political leaders, CEOs, celebrities, and business magnates adopted the Day-Date so frequently that it eventually earned the nickname the President's Watch, and psychologically, that reputation matters. Celebrities like Bruno Mars, Drake, and Victoria Beckham have been spotted wearing this masterpiece over the years. Because the Day-Date attracts individuals who value influence, these are people who enjoy leadership roles. They like making decisions. They like responsibility. And unlike many luxury watches that communicate wealth, the Day-Date communicates power. That's why the Day-Date often appeals to personalities who enjoy building organizations, leading teams, and shaping outcomes. But beneath the spotlight exists another type of collector entirely, and honestly, they might be the most passionate collectors of all. What if the most confident person in the room wasn't wearing a Rolex, a Patek Philippe, or a Richard Mille, but a G-Shock? Well, celebrities like Kanye West, Pharrell, and Justin Bieber have worn G-Shock over the years. And psychologically, that's far more interesting than it sounds. Since its introduction in the 1980s, the G-Shock has built a reputation around one simple idea: durability. It wasn't designed to impress collectors, it was built to survive. And that's exactly why the watch attracts a unique personality type. Practical operators value utility over status. They care about reliability, efficiency, and real-world usefulness. In psychological terms, they're often less influenced by social signaling and more influenced by functional outcomes. A G-Shock owner doesn't need a watch to prove anything. the watch exists to do a job. And that's what makes psychology so amazing. At first glance, luxury watches seem like objects made from metal, sapphire and gears. But beneath the surface, there's something much deeper, and they show the psychology of the person wearing them. Now, if you enjoy this deep dive into celebrity watch psychology, make sure to like, subscribe and stay locked in, because the stories behind these watches only get more fascinating from here on.